Instead of creating resilient young children, are we also creating softer children that need a lot more mental health support by putting a spotlight on it? Do you think it can go the other way?
I personally don't think so. I think actually the younger generation are not this snowflake kind of culture, or they're unable to cope with things. They're just really expressive. When we go through these periods that are very traumatic, we rediscover our sense of purpose and we discover our strengths as well.
I feel dentists that have qualified, newly qualified, or even been practicing for 5-10 years, they're living in a permanent state of anxiety.
The first thing to really emphasize is that it is really tough for students, and it's tough for newly qualified, and it's tough for dental professionals now. In that, there's social media, and that makes such a big difference.
Today I'm joined by an incredible human being, Dr Mahrukh Khwaja. She's a dentist with 15 years of experience, but what makes her so special is that she's also a qualified wellbeing psychologist. Do you think there might be a false impression that principals have what the culture actually is in the practice? What can they practically do to change things?
There's certain kind of aspects that probably make it more obvious. If you have a high turnover rate, if you have disgruntled staff, or you actually come up with employees saying, look, my wellbeing isn't good.
Mahrukh, thank you very much for coming on Successful. 7 months pregnant, congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming down.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm massively inspired by you and your journey and the work that you've done in UK dentistry. I think you're one of the first people to be speaking about mental health and well-being in a way that really resonates with the audience. And with you being a qualified psychologist, I bet there aren't really many qualified psychologists and dentists in the UK.
Yeah, no, there aren't that many currently, but I'm sure that will change over time. And even in healthcare, there aren't enough of us, but we're getting there, which is exciting.
So what made you want to study to become a psychologist? It's not like you didn't have enough on your plate.
Yeah, really interesting question. So my pivot into psychology really came from my own personal experience of burnout and depression. Prior to that, I hadn't experienced mental health challenges like that. And so it really took me by surprise. I really didn't have any tools to help support me. And luckily, I didn't feel the stigma that I know a lot of other healthcare professionals really feel to seeking support. So from my perspective, I straight away went privately to a psychotherapist, and I really wanted to learn some practical tools to help support me, because during that period, I was ruminating about the past, so chewing over things that I was unable to control. And I was also time traveling to the future, which felt very, very anxious. I had lost my sense of kind of meaning and purpose when it came to working with patients. I felt really disengaged, and I just wanted to get back to a sense of meaning, purpose, and joy. And so it was really kind of navigating that squiggly part of my life. And I learned all these really amazing psychological tools during that period, including mindfulness. At that period, a bit of a trending topic that I completely felt like I couldn't really get involved with because it didn't really make sense to me. I wasn't aware of the scientific
What year are we support?
So this would have been 2014, 2015.
Wow. Okay.
And so, my therapist mentioned mindfulness, and then that introduced me to this new world. And at that period as well, I discovered or rediscovered art. So when I was a kid, I loved being creative. And so I started upcycling furniture and going to painting classes, not to become an artist, but more just to express myself and to get mindfully kind of lost in that process. And certainly when we go through these periods that are very traumatic, we kind of rediscover our sense of purpose, and we discover our strengths as well. So I feel like I went through what we call post-traumatic growth in psychology, which is the flip of post-traumatic stress, where I kind of came out of that feeling like I'd grown a lot more resilient. And then I was really reflecting on how mad it is that I got to crisis point and started learning how to use cognitive behavioral therapy or mindfulness, or started to develop compassion practices, and even focused on happiness practices. And it got me reflecting on in dental school. And it's not just dental school, but I remember specifically dental school, how they're obsessed with this like pivotal aspect of prevention is better than cure. Yet we don't take that approach to our own mental fitness.
Right.
And certainly culturally at an organizational level, it's not preventative. Even now, I don't think so. And so I really, the truth of it, I was mad, like pissed off enough to think, okay, I've gone through this. Let's think of a way being a positive change. It wasn't enough me raising awareness, because at that point there were crisis point services, which is brilliant, but nothing preventative. And people were beginning to a little bit talk about their experiences, not enough, but I didn't want to just share my experience. For me, it was very much, how do we take positive action and make a positive impact? And it was obvious, let's bring psychoeducation tools from therapy to us early on. Like, what is the point in waiting until crisis point? It's a bit too late at that point. And certainly if we, taught our kids this at an early point, they'd be in better position, not only in their careers, but their personal lives, which is massive. And so that then led me to a deep dive into the intervention research, and looking at healthcare professionals and what is recommended when it comes to supporting medics and dentists and healthcare professionals. And again, the emerging research was that psychological interventions can make a difference. And so from my perspective, there's a big gap right now. Let's create Mind Ninja. Mm-hmm. And so that was where that seed was developed, really, like 2018, 2019, when I started talking more about mental wellness. But it was really driven my own experiences, being pissed off enough, wanting and realizing I need to do something. Also realizing I didn't know everything, obviously. So I needed to do my master's in applied positive psych. I was training as a mindfulness teacher. I was training in different therapies. But that's fine. I hadn't really anticipated how much of a growth mindset I could employ, because I wasn't going at it with imposter syndrome. It was really, actually, I'm going to learn this stuff. I'm going to apply it to dentistry, because you can do a master's. The magic is actually applying it to your niche and really coming up with tools that will be supportive and drawing upon research. And so, that was the kind of different elements to create Mind Ninja in the first place.
Sounds like pain changed your trajectory of your career. That pain, did it come from something that was happening in your dental career?
So the burnout was related to the practice I was in. I was in a toxic workplace where there was bullying and incivility, and not a positive place to be in. I was seeing a zillion patients.
Mixed, right?
No, I was doing NHS solely at that point. Right. So this was kind of beginning of my career. So it was working with a kind of a toxic boss that makes a massive difference to our well-being. And then personally, what was going on, I was going through a divorce, and so the combo was a driver for the burnout and depression. And it was quite an experience not having any self-care or well-being tools to know how to navigate it. But certainly the therapy was supportive, and then it helped me work on my own kind of individual practices to support myself.
In that scenario, many people turn to their friends or turn to the internet, and they kind of cope with things like on their own. What happens when people aren't seeking the right help? What's the consequence of not having these tools?
So seeking support from friends and loved ones, that's a great place to start. But the issue often is they're not equipped to have that knowledge, unless they happen to be a therapist or in the wellbeing industry. But they don't necessarily have that knowledge. So they can be very supportive, and that is a big positive when it comes to building our well-being. So that's brilliant. It's just, you do want tools and you do want to address it. The issue is, if we kind of leave it, it will come back at some point and trigger us. And so when I was going through it, I really did want to go and seek support. And for me, it was like, I want to go to a mind gym, really train those muscles. And I just want someone to like talk me through it. And I had this textbook understanding already because in my dental degree, I'd done a BSc in psychology. In the middle of the degree, you can intercalate. It's this weird thing that medics and dentists in the UK can do. And so I took a year out after third year and I did a psychology BSc. And so I had this textbook understanding, but that's not enough, obviously, until you have an experiential understanding that makes such a big impact. And so I kind of really understood it after going through it. And it did feel like a gym. It did feel like I was learning all these like really interesting tools in a way that I'd never done before, which also was really shocking, but a different time, a different culture, certainly at uni, and even at that period as well. The tide was beginning to change, but there still wasn't as much talk as there is now on well-being.
I think that's a lot to do with what you're doing as well. Seeing your products, seeing your talks, you've turned well-being and mental health in dentistry into an accessible service through the tools that you create. So I don't think you're advocating necessarily for therapy or counseling. That's not your business, right? You've made tools, and one of the tools I even purchased it as a great set of cards. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, so the Mind Fasting Toolkit.
This is not an advert, by the way. This is our fascinating product.
Yeah, so the Mind Fasting Toolkit was actually born out of my dissertation project. So we had two options for my master's: either do some research or create a product. And in fact, it wasn't really create a product; it was write about a product. And so I thought, okay, I've written this dissertation, let's actually create it. And so the first edition that was launched 2021, the idea really was to base it on the research, so base it on the literature around interventions that help support medics and dental professionals. And that what the emerging data is showing is, as I was saying, these psychological interventions can help, and specifically mindfulness, self-compassion practices. And so I created this deck of cards to help you really take a card and practically embed well-being actions, with your patients, but also at home. And so I wanted to kind of make that as engaging as possible. And so I created cards as opposed to a book. And like I said, it's supposed to be something you can play around with, and even take a card with you, or even within your practice as a principal, have well-being conversations in a more thoughtful, better way, and engage the whole team.
Now, when I saw your first articles, I didn't quite understand the topic at all, because thankfully I hadn't really experienced many difficulties that I felt that, I can relate to this, I understand this, until I was faced with the personal challenge. And I called you, and I was not for six when that challenge sort of came my way. And my precept of challenge and pain was that you just take it on the chin, you deal with it. But it came at me so fast that I didn't know what to do. So when I spoke to you, you said, Chaz, I'll come down and see you. And you had answers for me. You were acting as a friend, but it wasn't an opinion. It was, this is what psychology has to say. What you're going through is normal. These are the phases. And when you started to share that with me, I started to feel like, oh, so this is normal. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. And from that point, now when you speak about your product, I'm like, yeah, I get it. People need it. But I feel there's so many men out there that look at all of this and just think, oh, this is fluffy stuff for girls. But it's not. We should all be embracing this kind of education. Do you not think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as you go through life, and certainly I think a lot of people have understood this during the COVID times. As you go through life, you go through experiences, life happens, and invariably we all sit on a continuum, and you kind of get that, when things are happening in your life and you have, some struggles, perhaps you're feeling anxious, or you lose that sense of kind of meaning, or you're feeling kind of depleted. There's so many different things. You realize that, look, you're on this dynamic continuum that's constantly shifting, and it's so crucial to double down on those protective factors to help shift towards flourishing states. I think people are beginning to understand that narrative. Certainly before COVID times, I think there was such a big misunderstanding around mental well-being and mental fitness. And now with the conversation even around performance, and when we look at athletes, how they put so much emphasis on rest and recovery as well as performance. And also they practice things like mindfulness and other, psychological tools to support them. I think there is a bigger understanding around this than ever before. So I feel quite positive around that. But yeah, certainly like before COVID, having this conversation felt quite frustrating, because it was, you're having a conversation and people feeling like this wouldn't apply to me. But of course, it applies to everyone. And also we want to train, all our loved ones so that they've got the tools to support themselves. And it's not just about like the bad times, burnout, the depression, anxiety. It's also about the positive well-being markers, like feeling happier, more engaged at work, having a good quality of life, like all of those joyful aspects that make life worth living. That's really a big part of life, isn't it? So we want to help support people to experience that. So that's a big part of what I'm doing with positive psychology approaches, is to spotlight that area, because it isn't just that we don't want to be burnt out. We also want to feel like as good as we can, right? We want to be able to learn from mistakes and grow through them, and we want to build that resilience muscle.
What I find to be a shame is that dentistry is such a lucrative career. To get accepted by dental university, then to do well, then to upskill, then to come out the other end and you realize you don't actually know very much at all about communication. You go through all of that. I feel dentists that have qualified, newly qualified, or even been practicing for 5-10 years, they're living in a permanent state of anxiety. And that anxiety is often coming from comparison, fear of litigation, all kinds of things. What are the best ways to handle anxiety?
So the first thing to really emphasize is that it is really tough for students, and it's tough for newly qualified, and it's tough for dental professionals now, in that there's social media, and that makes such a big difference, because we're constantly seeing beautifully curated posts around teeth and smiles and the best of our work, essentially. And so for us to be triggered is quite natural, actually. So it's kind of acknowledging those elements, and then thinking about how can you use those tools that exist. So could you use mindfulness in this moment? Is there a way where you can take a breath and just notice what thoughts are popping up in my mind? Maybe it's a thought, I'm not good enough. Just simply labeling that thought, I'm not good enough. I'm having a thought that I'm not good enough. So having a bit of distance between you and your thought is so helpful, because it reminds you that you're not your thoughts come and go, and it puts a bit of psychological distance between us and our thoughts. So the labeling aspect, similarly to when you were saying when we spoke and you felt less alone, sharing your experience, and that sharing was really beneficial, right? It's because you're labeling your emotions and thoughts and you're shifting through them, and that's really helpful. So firstly, just even acknowledging that, I get triggered by certain accounts, or this thought popped up, that this comparison thought popped up, and then it's using self-compassion perhaps in that process, in that moment. So with self-compassion, you're showing the same loving kindness that you give to everyone else, your patients, your loved ones, your family, friends, but internally directing it. And so you might say to yourself, look, you might validate your pain. So use the words that resonate with you. So I might say, okay, that it's not nice feeling like this. Like I've got your back. That it isn't that you're awful, but using some sort of words to make you feel seen, validate your pain in terms of experiencing that. And it might be that you've experienced a bit of envy or, whatever it might be. These emotions can be quite difficult. And then it can be using even gestures to soothe yourself. So it can be like squeezing your arm or your hand, but you want to use words like you would a friend. So what would you say to a friend who saw a picture and got triggered? You're like, well, they put the best work out and just probably edited. And,
That's right.
and also it doesn't mean that your work isn't brilliant and doesn't mean you're not going to get there. Or, it's using that same kind of rhetoric that you would a close friend. But combining the mindfulness and self-compassion can be quite useful in that moment. But it is about kind of recognizing your thought patterns. Like everyone's different. But we all experience a series of automatic negative thoughts when things happen. And that's a natural part of the human existence, actually. It's very normal. The idea is to start recognizing your patterns so that when you experience them, you're not kind of stuck in the story of them. And that's where mindfulness and self-compassion can be particularly helpful, because with cognitive behavioral therapy, we're really asking you to change your thoughts, which is a skill that can be quite difficult to learn. With mindfulness and self-compassion, it's not about asking to change it. It's more about noticing it, being curious about it, letting it in, and, that kind of thing, and sitting with it, but then not buying into it and be like, okay, this is just a normal, natural thought that we all experience.
I think I remember you saying appreciate your surroundings and notice them. Because you said, Chaz, go for a walk, but this time, breathe in the nature, look at the tree, look at the leaf, notice the detail in it. And I did feel a bit weird walking out to do that. But I realized that I didn't even know that I'm surrounded by so much beauty, so much nature, feeling the table, looking at it, really paying attention to what's around us. Because I feel sometimes we're just walking through quite numb because we're always in a hurry. So I think you almost said, just slow it down. And just relating it back to teachings of the wise in my family, life's too short. I think once like my dad's 80 something, life goes like that. Is this really worth beating yourself up over? Of course, some things are serious. A complaint is serious, but how long we stay in that zone? I think as I'm getting older, I'm starting to understand that. Is this really as big of a deal as I'm making out to be? What is the worst case scenario?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what I love about mindfulness the most is just how practical and easy it is to integrate it. I mean, we often think mindfulness equals meditation, but there's so many informal practices like slowing down, taking deep breaths, going from a mindful nature walk and noticing, all the different senses. And that's a brilliant way of restoring your energy, restoring your focus, also inviting a host of positive emotions. So I feel like it's so accessible. We've always got our breath, and there's always an opportunity where we can practice mindfulness and hone into things like gratitude, because you mentioned when you slowed down, you're able to notice the beauty of the world and appreciate. And that's part of mindfulness, is inviting those positive emotions like gratitude and like self-compassion and curiosity about the world. These are humble yet really important positive emotions that make us feel good. And feel good emotions, it isn't just that they feel good, they do good. So in psychology, Barbara Fredrickson's a key researcher in positive emotions, and it's really exciting. She's got loads of research to support that positive emotions actually broaden and build our psychological resources, including resilience. So it isn't, like I said, just feel good factors. You are then more likely then to be resilient. You're going to be more able to reach out to others. You're going to be able to think better. So as you know, when we're stressed, our vision kind of narrows, doesn't it? With positive emotions, it broadens. And so, these are humble emotions, yet they make such a big difference.
Coming to depression, tell me more about that. Some people don't understand it. Some people don't believe in it. I believe in it because clearly it is a thing. There are people who are depressed, but there's so many different levels of depression. There's clinical depression. There's sort of living with a problem which is keeping you down. What's your view on depression, and how can people help themselves with depression?
So as I was saying, I had a textbook understanding of depression, and then it wasn't until I went through my personal kind of journey did I then experience depression myself. So I very much appreciate that it happens and we're all at risk. Again, prior to me being depressed, I wouldn't think that I didn't know enough about mental well-being either as well. And so I became more familiar with it, having gone through my experiences and then delving deeper into it. But we all sit on a continuum, even when it comes to things like depression and any mental illness. So if you kind of break down the continuum in the most simplest way, you've got kind of illness one side, and then the other side you've got flourishing and doing well, peak performance and no illness. But where we sit on that continuum is dependent on our genetics. Now, it's constantly shifting. We're moving up and down that continuum dependent on what's going on in our lives. And also this interplay between our protective and risk factors. So I think that's really kind of an important point to make. So if you think that you'll never get depressed, that's just not valid and true, because it can happen. And it's quite a natural, response, really. Bad things happen, very traumatic things happen. Our family member we lose, and we're going through grief. There's so many, things that can happen to us, aside from obviously work things like patient complaints or even being involved with the GDC. There's a multiple array of things, right? So it is in lots of ways quite natural and quite a normal part of human experience. The problematic aspect obviously is staying in depression and then feeling like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And then obviously there are very worrying aspects of depression in terms of your suicidal ideation, and that aspect is really why depression is so important to talk about and explore. What can one do? So if you're feeling symptoms of, feeling really low in mood, that's persistent, you've got loss of meaning and you have thoughts around suicide, then it's really vital that you get support. So you want to see a therapist or your GP. As dental professionals, we can actually we can bypass the GP by the NHS Practitioners Health Support Service, and you can get 6 free CBT sessions, or you can go privately. But there are opportunities. If you're not quite sure the next steps, you could even approach the many crisis point services in dentistry, including Confidential Dentist Health Support Trust, and they can signpost you as well and actually literally take you through that process. But you do really want to get help, and they may, whoever sees you, your doctor, may then you have a conversation around, do we want to medicate you, or do we want to go down the therapy route, or do we want a combo of the two? So that's kind of the depression management. But the long-term aspect of that, because it's acute episode of depression, which is what I experienced, but it could be chronic. There's lots of us that have got chronic depression. So it's thinking of then, how do you support yourself going forward? Because it isn't just that you want to get to kind of baseline, and you also, after you've gone through your initial period with depression, you want to at some point get that sense of meaning again, and also feel happier and more engaged, and those positive markers become very important. And you can still have a diagnosis of depression yet be flourishing. So the way you do this is using positive psychology practices. So and I think that's quite important as well. Important part of the wellbeing conversation, rather than we just want you to not be depressed. No, we want you to get to those +10 states, or closer to those +10 states.
Yeah. What do you think is the challenge with men? Because I know when I speak to friends, it's on the surface conversation. I don't think any of us know each other very well, but then you hear a female's conversation, you're pouring your heart out. So we're so wired so differently. For many of us, our fathers or grandfathers, they have a very alpha image. And you almost can expect them to say to you, if you open up about your feeling, that man up. What's your view on this whole man up and alpha and, just be a man? Is that helpful?
Yeah, I mean, it certainly isn't helpful. So yeah, there's lots of problems with that, but you can understand why our, older generation may have viewed it in that way. It's a completely different time and culture. So I've got a lot of, obviously respect for the older generation, the way they've managed things. I think the newer generation, or, our age, where we've got kids, we can really hopefully help embed these conversations early on and raise them in a different way. The time has changed. We're able to also do that. And the culture has changed where it's more open to do that. So, how we raise our boys to be a bit different and that really comes from the way you father your kids. So, how you explore your own experiences and share that with your son, share your emotional journey, be okay with his emotions, let him express his emotions in healthy ways and help, him explore tools if he needs to, because these emotions like anxiety are normal. Even our parents and grandparents certainly experience those. They just found different coping mechanisms, and perhaps they're not quite sharing that with us at times, but they've developed their own coping strategy, and they're not all unhealthy. Like, it might be that they've been drinking and unhealthy things, but there'll be healthy things they've done to support themselves, whether that's religion or relationships, being around positive relationships, whether that's going for a run or swimming or something. They've developed some good practices as well. But I think there's a big opportunity for men to be raised differently. And it needs to be done because there's so much, as I was saying, with social media, not just that, with the wars and with the global kind of climate problems and financial. There's so many elements that we're more familiar with than we would have been previously, because we're more connected with the news. And so the stresses are different.
I agree completely that through this knowledge, we're probably going to raise healthier children. But do you think there's also an argument to be had that there is possibility that there may be victimization of, I am going through mental health issues. There's a rise in this. Are we, instead of creating resilient young children, are we also creating softer children that, need a lot more mental health support by putting a spotlight on it? Do you think it can go the other way?
I mean, great question. I personally don't think so. And I think actually the younger generation are not, a snowflake kind of culture, or they're unable to cope with things. They're just really expressive, and they're talking about, how they're feeling in a way that we weren't, or previous generations weren't. And also what they're dealing with is different from what we were dealing with. I didn't have a phone growing up. I got my phone when I was 16, 17 or something. So I didn't grow with social media or, like I said, being that connected with the news. The social comparison has really increased so much. I grew up with magazines. Now you see it on TV and on our phones, right? So it's a completely different climate. So I personally don't think so. I personally also don't think if we talk about illness, it means that you're more likely then to become ill. It's just really about increasing awareness and hopefully signposting people in the right direction, and also just supporting your peers and your loved ones better. Because like I said, this is a natural part of the human existence, but we want to help support, anyone who's going through this, so that they can navigate it, come out the other side, and, hopefully still have a sense of meaning and purpose and find that again. So that's really the idea behind exploring mental health and well-being.
As a parent, I'm finding this super helpful. So when Helena says, "Dad, I'm sad," instead of saying, "Oh, you shouldn't be sad," that's not, I validate her feelings. That, "Oh, why, sweetheart? Why are you feeling sad? It's normal to feel sad." And when she opens up to me, I feel like we're making progress. And I see a newfound confidence in her as well off the back of that. So I feel this education should be really, we should be welcoming it, a bit like you immerse yourself and became a psychologist, but we should be reading up on it and learning more about it. And I guess with platforms like TikTok, I just need to watch one video about anxiety or mental health, and then I'll get 10 or 20 more. There's so much to be learned. So I feel we're quite lucky that we've got all of these tools available, especially with what you're doing within dentistry. If there was one thing in dentistry that you could just, make it your life's purpose, one thing that you could fix, what would it be when it comes to the topic of mental health and well-being? What would you like to implement in practices?
Yeah, I think my biggest aspect would be to get dental principals, so practice owners, to really invest in the people. And I know there are practices that are doing this, but not enough. And we need a bigger spotlight on culture, around building positive cultures, around the principal training up in terms of leadership wellness practices so that they can, not only support themselves, because that is important, but also support the team so that they're more engaged at work, happier at work. That's a big, big issue. Right now, there's still an individual focus. So even when, over the 6 years I've been delivering workshops and programs, I often get asked to speak about well-being from the individual, side of things. What can a dental professional do to feel happier, less stressed, less anxious? But actually, a big, big factor of poor well-being is the culture of a practice. And so, if we don't address the organizational issues, we just will not improve on this poor kind of well-being stats. So it's madness if we just focus on just one aspect. It's when the two marry up, then like magic happens and we can make some progress.
I think a lot of principals listening will be thinking, our culture's great. We've got a shiny new practice, we've got the latest equipment, advertising, everyone looks happy. So do you think there might be a false impression that principals have of what the culture actually is in the practice? What can they practically do to change things like that?
Yeah, I think it takes some reflection to really explore the culture and be less defensive around it, I guess. There's certain kind of aspects that probably make it more obvious. If you have a high turnover rate, if you have disgruntled staff, you have conflicts at work, all of these things, or you actually come up with employees saying, look, my well-being isn't good. So all of these are telltale kind of signs. So I think when you kind of sit down and reflect, you might be able to see those elements. Even beyond that, right? Building culture is an ongoing kind of thing that we do when we build a business. And so investing in that training, because as dental professionals, we're trained clinically and we constantly upskill clinically, yet we aren't trained in leadership, communication skills, well-being comes into this. And so, investing in that area, once a principal has this awareness of the business side, the business case for it, then it becomes a little bit more pressing, I think. And there's a lot of data now, and this is why organizations focus on this, actually.
That's right.
So there's data to support that investing in people makes a difference in terms of engagement, productivity, profitability.
Sure.
So this is the bottom line we're talking about. So in terms of what principals can actually do then, lots of things. So there was a framework that was launched 2021, mental health, wellness and dentistry framework. And this came from a bunch of people in dentistry, not me, but lots of different people in dentistry to write this, including Prof. Tim Newton, who's one of my mentors. But anyway, this framework's brilliant. It talks about having a mental well-being champion within the practice and training them in mental health first aid and suicide awareness. There's a mental well-being lead within the practice that's trained in suicide awareness and mental health first aid. So you could get someone interested in well-being and train them in that area. I would go further than that and say it'd be great to actually have the whole team trained in mental health first aid, and also have perhaps what I call a well-being ambassador, where they're not just trained in detecting the early signs of poor health and depression and suicide and signpost them appropriately, but they know how to embed well-being initiatives at work. So, things like increasing gratitude, getting strengths embedded within the culture, and helping different team members craft their roles so they can use more of their strengths at work, so they're more engaged at work. So little interventions, little activities they can do based on the research, and that can help increase those positive markers like happiness, engagement at work, meaning, which is so crucial. Like I was saying, this is the thing that's often missed. We just focus at crisis point. We need to move away from that, and it's a lot more holistic, and like I said, it will feed into your bottom line as well. There's a business case for this, aside from the well-acknowledged human case.
I agree. The principals I know and I work with, they're hugely invested in, they'll call it wellbeing days. I guess it's team building exercises, escape rooms, and like days out, investing in the practice, investing in marketing, of course. This seems like a sensible investment. Is this something that people could contact Mind Ninja about, your company, and you could deliver a framework or guide people on practices on installing something like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a wellbeing ambassador program where I train principals around training someone within their team to become this ambassador. So I've also kind of focused on mental health first aid there, but then added on the positive psychology component around building these interventions and these initiatives within the workplace. So you can train someone within your team to then start increasing the well-being and being proactive. And I think that's what's missing generally. So yeah, I'd absolutely love to explore that further.
And what can be the impact for the business if this is not addressed?
So if this isn't addressed, we're talking about, poor retention of staff, and staff retention is a big issue in dentistry at the moment. We're talking about sickness and sickness increasing. So it can be that, the staff members take time off, but more than often, actually, it's presenteeism where they're coming in, yet they're not feeling good. They're not 100% at all. So we're going to kind of reduce those aspects. So, big impact on those. And then performance, obviously. When we're not feeling good, we're not able to perform at our best. We have more complaints.
And patients can feel it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. This feeds into clinical care. And so, the way we can prevent that is investing in the team's happiness and their education and training. Because as I was saying, we get training generally in the clinical stuff, but actually the non-clinical stuff is so crucial when it comes to delivering the best performance and care for our patients.
I love that. I wrote a book, Experience Marketing, Growing Your Practice Without Spending a Penny More on Marketing. And one of the things in there I speak about is the greeting. It's so important, the first impression. But how you expected as a team member, if you're crumbling inside, your life's falling apart, to switch that on all the time, every time? Because the principal's going to be saying, look, I'm measuring you on this, you've got to do it like this. That's so unfair if the root cause isn't being addressed, and it can be quite a lonely journey. I would encourage all principals to install well-being into the practice in a way that makes sense to them as well.
Absolutely.
They've got to really understand it. You can't just go and buy well-being. It's got to be something that you believe in as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the issue with, I guess, the commercialization of well-being, the kind of yoga and the nice spa days and these well-being days. They're great for social connection. I think when you go as a, team and you go somewhere, that's brilliant. But we're not really addressing the root causes and issues within the practice. And that's where, training in this area and really reflecting on and getting feedback from your team around well-being challenges, asking your team around this is really helpful. And certainly within my program, that's what I'll train you to do. This isn't rocket science. It's just literally being curious and asking questions and collecting a little bit of data. And you'll be able to see what are the issues at the minute? How can I correct that or improve on it each, over the years, over time, and make a meaningful impact when it comes to well-being, because it isn't that employees are looking for those well-being days to fix what's going on in terms of the organizational issues. And so we really need to address that. Otherwise, we don't get to, the higher profitability, the productivity, the happiness, and all of those important markers.
There are a few principles I know. One I'm thinking of in particular. And I've always known him to be a super kind individual. But who he is now, 10 years on of practice ownership, is quite a tough, almost there's no feeling. And I've asked him about his journey, and he said, Shaz, I've been so kind to some of my staff. I feel betrayed, backstabbed. I did this for them. I gave that one a loan. And he said, I'm tired of being kind now. I'm sure there are going to be principals thinking that, this is also not a winning strategy because I've tried kindness and care. Now, I still think you should be doing this, but what can we say to them who feel a little bit hurt and betrayed and don't really see the value in this kind of thing because they've been doing it in other ways before?
Yeah, I think it's a journey that one needs to go through. It sounds like they have a lot of trauma to unpack.
Yeah.
And yes, it sounds like they've gone through horrible experiences. Unfortunately, these things happen. So I think it's worth them addressing their well-being. It sounds like that's really important. And that's sometimes we miss supporting leaders, don't we? So, really getting that principal to explore their well-being. It might be that they're a bit burnt out as well. One key characteristic of burnout is lack of empathy. And so, perhaps it is that with principals, they're managing so many elements, but it is a journey. You can't convince someone who's not ready to accept exploring further training. It's just more, having conversations, checking in, maybe supporting them because maybe they're finding it quite tough. And when they're in a more positive mindset, they might be able to accept other ways of doing things. And it isn't about just being a walkover, and like being kind means that you don't have boundaries. You can still be compassionate and warm and loving with your team members, yet have boundaries. And that we need that leadership as well. Compassionate leadership is really kind of important. So it isn't just that like you're going to be kind and get walked over. You're going to be kind and compassionate with boundaries and still be respected, and you'll get better outcomes. But of course, that takes a while for someone to figure that out.
I think that's really insightful, because if I think of some of the most successful practice owners I know, they are full of positivity, and that rubs off onto the team. And the team are like that as well. So when you enter the practice, the aura is just different. So it starts from the top, very top. Absolutely. So that's really interesting that you said that principals really should be unlocking what's going on. And if we look at the larger organizations are always on a cost-cutting spree. But mental health, well-being has been a huge area of investment for them. And obviously we should learn from that they know something that many of us small business owners perhaps don't. Have you seen a big shift in non-dental organizations investing in well-being and health and the ambassador sort of element that you've been speaking about?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So outside of healthcare, there is a clear understanding of the importance of well-being. I mean, if you look at Gallup scores, there's so much disengagement in the workplace outside of, including healthcare, but outside of healthcare, it's well acknowledged. Burnout is a big everywhere, every industry. And so there are lots and lots of millions of pounds, dollars that are put into leadership training, leadership wellbeing training, employee interventions, organizational interventions, because there's such a clear business case for it. Like it's a no-brainer. So it's really obvious in other industries. I feel like we're kind of getting there, and there's beginning understanding of it, but it's still in lots of ways crisis point focused. It's not really expanded to prevention at this point, or positive psychology. It's still focused at crisis point within healthcare. But of course that is changing and will continue to change over the years.
Thank you, Mahrukh. I started this podcast to unlock success, what success looks like for us. Now, to me, from what you've been sharing with me, is being a great father, where I can get Helene to speak about her feelings and for her to feel supported. For me, that's success. Could you tell me what success means to you today?
So, I mean, there's success. How do I answer this question? There's success in terms of the business, and I guess success when it comes to my personal life. But overall, I would say it's about me enjoying the squiggly journey. And I think that's a difficult thing to do because, invariably we want to go from point A to point B, like in a straight linear line, but life isn't like that. So just enjoying the journey, savoring the journey, and injecting as much joy as I can, and as much play and engagement as I can, so I can feel good in the process. So I think that's what success means to me at the moment.
I love that. And with you about to embrace motherhood, I think that's going to be a fascinating journey for you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. New chapter where I'm, going, it's motherhood, and then obviously with the business.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I've got 9 months of maternity off dentistry, so I've got my Bupa job wrapping up like next week.
Okay.
But I still got my ninja projects going. So like the last quarter, I've got like 3-4 things booked. So let's see how that goes. But I'm excited, and I get so much meaning from the work I'm doing with my ninja. So it's quite joyful to have that and continue to be doing that.
Thank you, Mahrukh. I know you've been helping thousands of people, officially training in all forms. I know you work around the clock. So I just want to say thank you very much for that work. You're helping a lot of people. And if we can all acknowledge mental health, well-being in a positive way, especially within the practice, and I'm certainly going to be encouraging practices to be looking into this, then dentistry can be a kinder, nicer place to be in. Do you not think?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for your kind words. But yeah, no, I agree. We need to prioritize the well-being of people.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mahrukh.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to Successful, Depth, Not Display. If today's conversation inspired you, please do subscribe and share with like-minded people. You can discover more about our guests on successful.dental. I'm Shaz Memon, and I'm passionate about helping practices rank organically on Google to attract high-intent patients. At Digimax, we use 20 years of proven SEO strategy rooted in patient psychology to make that happen. We're also known for our patient conversion machine websites, not just beautiful, but engineered to turn more visitors into patients, using everything we've learned over 2 decades. I'd also love to introduce you to Dental Bio. With Dental Bio, you can build your personal brand by sharing where you work, write blogs and articles, showcase your reviews, add links, your transformations, and more. Everything you need to build your personal LinkedIn Bio website all in one place. Get started for free. Just visit dental.bio. And if you'd like to support my charity powered by the incredible UK dental community, visit wellsonwheels.co.uk or search No Water Land on Prime Video or Apple TV to watch the documentary. I'm Shaz Memon. Until next time, remember, success isn't just a result, it's a feeling. It's fulfillment, contribution, growth, connection, and being true to yourself. Real success is lived from the inside out. For me, it's about depth, not display. Thank you.